Friends, welcome to my channel. Tonight, we're witnessing something truly extraordinary, a turning point that military analysts are calling one of the most devastating days of this war. The numbers you're about to hear are not exaggerated, not inflated, and not rumor. They are official, confirmed, and shocking. What happened today in Pokrovsk may well go down in history as the single worst 24 hours the Russian military has faced since this invasion began. In just one rotation of the Earth, 24 hours, an entire segment of Russia's war machine was shattered. More than 1,000 soldiers lost. Hundreds of vehicles reduced to wreckage. Entire drone fleets wiped out of the sky. This wasn't chaos, it was precision. A calculated, perfectly timed operation by Ukrainian defenders who have turned intelligence, speed, and strategy into devastating weapons. The scale of destruction is almost impossible to grasp. Imagine an entire army unit gone. Imagine 500 drones, those mechanical eyes that spy, guide, and strike, all burning in a single day. Imagine 90 fueled tankers exploding one after another, cutting off the lifeline that keeps tanks and armored vehicles moving. That's what happened in Pokrovsk. This wasn't just another battle. This was a collapse, a total breakdown of Russian logistics and coordination. Every destroyed vehicle, every lost drone, every silent radio signal represents more than damage. It represents a message Russia's power on the battlefield is breaking apart piece by piece. And this is not coming from rumor mills or propaganda networks. These are numbers confirmed through official military channels, verifiable, cross-checked, and consistent across multiple sources. It's the kind of data that leaves no room for denial. Something fundamental is happening in this war, a shift so powerful that even Kremlin loyalists can no longer spin it away. So tonight, we'll break down the full picture, what happened, why it happened, and what it means not just for Russia and Ukraine, but for the entire balance of this conflict. Because this wasn't just a bad day for Moscow, it was a glimpse into a future where its military machine simply cannot keep up. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we'll walk through the destruction, the numbers, the strategy, and the consequences, and you'll see why analysts are calling Pokrovsk the place where Russia's war began to unravel. Before we dive deeper, take a moment to support this channel. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It helps more people understand what's really happening behind the headlines. And it keeps independent voices like this one alive. Friends, this story matters. Because tonight, the battlefield spoke louder than any speech from Moscow ever could. What happened in Pokrovsk today is not just another battle update. It's a warning to anyone who still believes this war is locked in a stalemate. Because after nearly 4 years of bloodshed, strategy, and exhaustion, one side just suffered a collapse so severe that even seasoned military observers are struggling to find comparisons. Let's break this down clearly. According to official Ukrainian reports, over 1,000 Russian troops were lost in a single day. Not over a week, not over a campaign, just 24 hours. Imagine the scale of that. That's the size of an entire battalion wiped out before the sun rose and set again. And these aren't just ordinary losses. These are trained soldiers, equipment operators, mechanics, and logistics teams, the backbone of any functioning military operation. Now add this 490 drones destroyed. That's nearly 500 eyes in the sky, wiped out in a day. These drones aren't simple consumer gadgets. They represent millions in technology, reconnaissance capability, and tactical coordination. Every drone destroyed means blind spots on the battlefield. It means confusion in the command structure. It means Russian units operating without real-time data, without sight, without direction. In modern warfare, that's the same as fighting blindfolded. But here's where it becomes devastating. 90 fuel tankers gone. 90. To anyone unfamiliar with logistics, that might sound like just another number. But for any modern army, it's the single most critical vulnerability. You can have tanks, artillery, drones, and infantry, but without fuel, they're all useless. They can't move, can't reposition, can't fight. Destroying 90 tankers in a day is not an accident. It's a strategic masterpiece. It's a deliberate attempt to choke the Russian military from within. Think about what happens next. Those tanks that survive the fighting, they're stranded. Armored columns running dry in the mud. Convoys stop dead on the roads. Resupply lines breaking apart because fuel can't reach the front. This isn't just a loss of machinery, it's paralysis. The entire system that keeps a modern army moving has been shattered. And all of this happened in Pokrovsk, a city that has now become synonymous with the word attrition. For months, analysts have warned that the battle for Pokrovsk would determine control over the Donetsk corridor, the logistical artery linking the southern and eastern fronts. And tonight, that artery is bleeding. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. These losses aren't guesses. They aren't social media claims. They are officially released numbers verified by independent analysts and satellite imagery. When you have confirmation across multiple intelligence channels, that means this isn't propaganda. It's fact. The destruction is real. So what kind of operation could inflict this level of damage? Military experts believe it wasn't a single strike or one battle. It was a sequence, an orchestrated, intelligence-driven campaign, a multi-layered assault combining drones, precision artillery, and electronic warfare to dismantle not just the enemy's equipment, but its ability to respond. In other words, this was not chaos. This was coordination. And it speaks volumes about how much the Ukrainian military has evolved. In 2022, Ukraine fought defensively, reacting to Russian offensives. By late 2023, it learned how to counterattack. But now, in late 2025, we're seeing something new. Ukraine fighting proactively, predicting the enemy's moves, using precision intelligence to strike exactly where it hurts most. And what's even more striking is the message this sends to Moscow. For 2 years, Russia relied on its industrial capacity, believing that sheer numbers would win the war. More tanks, more drones, more men. But today, Pokrovsk proved that numbers don't win modern wars. Intelligence, coordination, and timing do. There's a psychological element here too. Imagine being a Russian soldier on the front lines, hearing that 1,000 of your comrades were lost in a day, that hundreds of drones are gone, that your tank might not even have fuel to retreat. That's not just demoralizing, that's shattering. And morale, once broken, doesn't come back easily. In the command rooms of Moscow, this news will be a nightmare, because what unfolded in Pokrovsk wasn't just a defeat, it was exposure. The world saw the limits of Russia's supposed invincibility. The illusion of endless resources cracked. But for Ukraine, this moment carries a different weight. It's validation. Proof that strategic patience, Western training, and relentless adaptation are paying off. It shows that an underdog nation can take on a much larger adversary and win, not through size, but through skill. Still, let's not lose sight of what these numbers truly represent. Human lives. Over 1,000 soldiers gone means 1,000 families shattered. Mothers, fathers, sons, many of them conscripts who never wanted this war. The tragedy of Pokrovsk cuts both ways, because for every victory counted in statistics, there's also heartbreak counted in silence. And that silence is spreading across Russia, across Ukraine, across Europe. People are starting to understand that this war, now nearing its 4th year, has crossed every imaginable threshold of destruction. Pokrovsk is not just another battle. It's a symbol of what happens when a nation refuses to surrender and when another refuses to stop. So as we step deeper into this story tonight, remember, Pokrovsk isn't just a name on a map. It's the place where the tide of this war might have turned, not because of one decisive strike, but because an entire system, an entire military began to crumble under its own weight. In the next section, we'll pull back the curtain further, exploring the broader picture, the cumulative toll of this war, and how Pokrovsk fits into a much larger pattern of Russian collapse that's been building quietly, piece by piece, for years. When we zoom out from Pokrovsk and look at the full scale of this war, the numbers become almost too large to process. What happened today? 1,000 soldiers lost, hundreds of drones gone is just a single snapshot of a much bigger, darker picture. Over nearly 4 years of fighting, Russia's war machine has been grinding itself into dust. What began in February 2022 as an invasion meant to last days has turned into a catastrophe measured in decades of loss. According to official tallies, Russia has now lost over 1.1 million personnel in total. That number on its own defies comprehension. It's not just soldiers, it's pilots, medics, engineers, and countless conscripts thrown into a fire they never trained for. Imagine 1 million people, the population of an entire city, simply erased from their futures. Every one of those numbers carries a story: a young man sent to the front without proper training, a father leaving behind children, a medic trying to save others until the shells found him too. But the losses don't stop with human lives. They stretch across the entire spectrum of Russian hardware, from tanks to missiles, from drones to warships. 11 350 tanks gone. That's more than most countries even possess in total. The sheer destruction of armored units shows that this isn't a fast maneuver-based war like the world saw in 20th century conflicts. This is something different. This is a slow, brutal industrial war where everything becomes a target and nothing survives long. And perhaps the most haunting figure of all, 34 443 artillery systems destroyed. Let that number sink in. Nearly 5,000 pieces of heavy firepower wiped out. This isn't a war of speed, it's a war of endurance. One defined by trenches, shells, and skies filled with drones instead of fighter jets. In many ways, Pokrovsk represents the climax of that evolution, the point where old doctrines finally collapsed under the weight of a new kind of warfare. Because if you look closely, Pokrovsk is not an accident. It's the logical outcome of a war that has changed shape many times, but has always followed one underlying pattern: Russia overextending, Ukraine adapting, and technology rewriting the rules of survival. Let's talk about those drones. Over 80,000 lost since the start of the conflict. 80,000 mechanical birds that have redefined what it means to fight, to spy, to strike. No longer are drones an accessory to warfare. They are warfare. And that's why today's figure, 490 drones downed in a single day, matters so much. It shows us that Ukraine isn't just surviving this evolution, it's mastering it. Every drone taken down means fewer eyes on the battlefield, fewer precision strikes, fewer chances for Russia to react. And that mastery didn't happen by chance. Ukraine built it under fire. In 2022, the country scrambled to assemble makeshift drone units. By 2023, it was mass producing them with 3D printed frames and imported parts. Now, in 2025, those same units are part of a coordinated system linking satellite data, radar mapping, and artillery guidance, all working in real time. The result: a military that can spot a target, verify it, and destroy it within minutes. Pokrovsk proves that this integration works. Meanwhile, Russia's old advantages, numbers, armor, artillery, are becoming burdens. The more they deploy, the more they lose. Their supply chains stretch thinner every day. Every tank that rolls forward consumes fuel from a dwindling stockpile. Every artillery barrage costs millions they can't replace fast enough. And every drone destroyed means one less set of eyes watching the skies. But perhaps the most telling sign of collapse is in logistics. Remember those 90 fuel tankers destroyed in Pokrovsk? That's not a coincidence. It's a deliberate strategy: cut the arteries that feed the beast. A tank without fuel is a coffin of steel. A truck without diesel is just scrap metal in a field. By targeting logistics instead of just troops, Ukraine has learned to hit the places that hurt most, deep behind enemy lines. And now the consequences are starting to ripple. Reports are already emerging of Russian armored divisions stalling due to lack of fuel. Some troops are abandoning vehicles to retreat on foot. Others are trapped, isolated, unable to communicate because electronic warfare systems are jamming their signals. This is not just a tactical defeat, it's structural. The kind that eats away at a military from within until nothing functional remains. Now let's talk about what Pokrovsk means strategically. It sits in a corridor that connects key Russian supply hubs to the occupied territories further south. Losing control there doesn't just mean losing ground, it means losing stability across the entire front. Supply routes have to stretch further, convoys have to risk longer journeys, and every kilometer adds more exposure to strikes. That's how empires crumble, not in one moment, but in a chain reaction of small collapses that lead to something far bigger. And make no mistake, Russia's leadership knows this. Every drone lost, every tanker hit, every burnt-out convoy is a political problem as much as a military one. The Kremlin can control state media, but it cannot hide the silence of returning funerals or the growing whispers among soldiers' families asking why. Pokrovsk may have broken more than just machines. It may have broken the illusion of invincibility that Putin's regime depends on. But while Russia struggles to make sense of its losses, Ukraine faces its own challenges. Because behind the numbers, there's exhaustion. There are soldiers fighting day after day, holding the line with courage that borders on superhuman. There are medics working in shattered hospitals. There are civilians in cities like Pokrovsk living without sleep power or safety. And yet, through all of that, the determination doesn't fade. When analysts say Pokrovsk marks a turning point, they don't just mean militarily, they mean psychologically. For the first time in a long time, Ukrainians believe that the impossible, the defeat of Russia's massive army, is not just a dream, it's visible, it's happening slowly but surely. And perhaps that's why this day matters so much, because Pokrovsk isn't just another place on a map. It's the proof that courage and intelligence can outweigh brute force. It's the story of a smaller nation refusing to kneel, of soldiers who learn to fight smarter instead of louder, and of a military machine that's beginning to realize its limits. As we move into the next section, we'll go beyond the battlefield. We'll look at what these massive losses mean for Russia's future, the logistics, the leadership, and the crumbling chain of command inside Moscow. Because if Pokrovsk was the explosion, the aftershocks are only beginning. If Pokrovsk was the explosion, then what's happening inside Russia right now is the aftershock, the slow, invisible collapse that follows a disaster. You can almost feel it rippling outward from the battlefield, reaching command rooms, ministries, and factories that once believed they were untouchable. What's breaking now isn't just military hardware. It's confidence, control, and the myth that Russia's system can endure anything. Let's start with logistics, the backbone of any army. When 90 tankers vanish in a single day, it's not just a battlefield issue, it's an operational nightmare. Each tanker fuels multiple vehicles, so losing them isn't losing 90 assets. It's losing hundreds of operational vehicles. Tanks that can't advance, trucks that can't deliver ammunition, and artillery that can't be repositioned. The ripple effect of that loss is enormous. Suddenly, frontline units run dry, supply columns stall, and commanders have to make impossible choices: defend, retreat, or abandon. Now imagine trying to coordinate all of this across a 1,000-kilometer front line. Every army depends on a chain of communication. Every order has to move through layers, from the Kremlin to the generals, from generals to division heads, from division heads to battalion commanders. When a system this big starts losing cohesion, small mistakes multiply fast. A missed signal, a delayed resupply, a wrong coordinate. On a battlefield as volatile as Pokrovsk, that's all it takes for a local setback to become a catastrophe. Inside Moscow, officials are watching these numbers in panic. Because for all their public confidence, they know what's really happening. Reports are piling up about missing equipment, broken morale, and infighting between units that no longer trust their commanders. Even Russia's famed armored brigades are starting to look like patchwork, units stitched together from remnants with outdated vehicles and exhausted crews. And then there's the human factor, something statistics can't capture. Inside Russia's army, discipline is cracking. Soldiers are refusing orders. Some are sabotaging equipment rather than being sent to the front again. Others vanish between rotations. Videos are surfacing online of soldiers complaining about being abandoned by commanders, left without food, fuel, or even communication gear. Each video, each testimony chips away at the illusion that Moscow is in control. Pokrovsk didn't just expose Russia's military weakness. It exposed the dysfunction of an entire system built on fear instead of accountability. Because when an army is afraid to tell the truth up the chain, bad information becomes deadly. Generals inflate victories to avoid punishment. Commanders hide losses to keep their positions. And by the time the truth reaches the Kremlin, it's already too late. That's why these massive losses keep happening. The Russian military isn't just fighting an external enemy, it's fighting its own delusions. Inside those walls of power, loyalty matters more than accuracy. Optimism is rewarded, realism is punished, and in a war that depends on quick adaptation, that kind of culture is suicide. But it's not only the military that's bleeding, it's the economy. Russia's war machine now consumes nearly half its federal budget. Factories that once made cars or machinery are now building tanks and missiles. That might sound like strength, but it's actually a sign of desperation. A healthy economy creates value, a war economy destroys it. Every tank built is destined to burn. Every missile produced is a promise of more loss. Pokrovsk's destruction means Russia will have to replace thousands of destroyed vehicles, drones, and systems, and fast. But production is slowing. Sanctions have cut off access to Western components. Skilled engineers have fled the country. Replacement parts come at inflated costs from China or the black market. Each piece of imported technology has to be reverse engineered or reassembled under substandard conditions. The result is what soldiers call ghost equipment, machines that look functional on paper but fail when tested in combat. And then there's manpower. The Kremlin keeps mobilizing, but each wave gets older, less trained, and less willing. Recruitment offices are running out of volunteers. Conscripts are being dragged from small towns, promised salaries they'll never see. Families are bribed with small payments and told not to ask questions. And those who return, the wounded, the broken, the haunted, are coming back to a Russia that doesn't know what to do with them. This is how wars consume nations, not just through the deaths on the battlefield, but through the quiet disintegration at home. When you stretch your economy to the breaking point, when your population lives in fear, when your government survives only by suppressing the truth, eventually the cracks reach the surface. And Pokrovsk is one of those cracks. It's also a mirror showing Russia something it doesn't want to see, a future it can't control. In past wars, Russia could hide behind its vast size and its myth of endurance. It could throw millions of soldiers into the field and still call it victory. But this is not 1943. This is the age of satellite warfare, drone surveillance, and real-time intelligence. Every loss is visible. Every explosion is recorded. Every mistake becomes global news in minutes. And that's the greatest irony of all. In trying to project strength, Russia has made its weakness visible to the entire world. Every drone Ukraine shoots down, every fuel convoy it destroys, every intercept it releases, all of it paints a picture of a military that's unraveling in slow motion. But here's the dangerous part. Cornered powers don't surrender easily. They escalate. When systems like this start to collapse, leaders like Putin don't admit failure. They double down. They blame the West. They claim sabotage. They invent new enemies. And that's what makes this moment so tense. Because the more Russia loses on the ground, the more unpredictable it becomes at the top. Pokrovsk isn't just a battlefield story. It's a warning about what happens when a government runs out of victories, but still refuses to stop fighting. Every loss it suffers increases the pressure to do something dramatic, something that distracts the public, something that reasserts control. And in a country armed with thousands of nuclear warheads, that's a terrifying prospect. But let's not lose sight of the other side of this story, the human side. While Russia's system cracks, Ukraine's resolve hardens. In cities like Pokrovsk, soldiers who fought for months without rest are still standing. They've adapted, improvised, and learned to fight smarter than an army 10 times their size. They're not just defending land anymore. They're defending the idea that truth and courage can still defeat lies and force. So when we talk about Pokrovsk, we're not just talking about numbers or maps. We're talking about a test of endurance, one that's exposing who learns and who breaks, who faces reality and who hides from it. And right now, all the evidence points in one direction. Ukraine is learning. Russia is breaking. In the next section, we'll go even deeper, beyond the battlefield and the bureaucracy, into what these losses mean for the future of this war. Because while Pokrovsk may look like a tactical disaster, its real impact could be strategic, reshaping alliances, forcing new decisions in Moscow, and changing how the world sees this conflict forever. To understand what happens next after Pokrovsk, we have to look beyond the trenches and command centers. Because what's happening now isn't just the collapse of a single battle. It's the unraveling of an entire system built on illusion. The illusion of strength. The illusion of endless resources. The illusion that the Kremlin could outlast the West through sheer willpower. Pokrovsk shattered that illusion, and the shockwaves are already spreading through every layer of Russia's state apparatus, from the generals at the front to the oligarchs in Moscow and the factories running 24 hours a day to keep the war machine alive. Let's begin with the military leadership, the men whose careers depend on keeping Putin's faith. For months, these commanders have been feeding the Kremlin a steady diet of optimism, exaggerated maps, inflated kill ratios, and glowing reports of progress. But Pokrovsk is too big to hide. Even state television couldn't spin 1,000 casualties and hundreds of destroyed drones into a success story. The reports coming in are undeniable. Satellite images, intercepted communications, footage from the battlefield. The truth is out, and it's brutal. This is the point where fear takes over inside authoritarian systems. When victories disappear, leaders look for scapegoats. Already, sources from inside Russia suggest that several mid-level officers have been detained under accusations of negligence or defeatism. Others have been quietly reassigned to remote commands, the political equivalent of exile. History shows us what comes next purges paranoia and infighting. Stalin's shadow still lingers over Russia's institutions, and whenever the military stumbles, the knives come out. But there's another layer here, the economic one. The Russian war machine doesn't run on ideology alone. It runs on oil, money, and manpower. And every day, that machine is grinding itself down. When your government is spending nearly half its budget on war, you're not investing in the future. You're burning it. Hospitals, infrastructure, all of it sacrificed for a war that's now clearly unwinnable. The sanctions have done their job. Slowly, methodically, they've stripped Russia of critical imports, replacement parts for tanks, semiconductors for missiles, even basic electronics for drones, all harder to get, all more expensive, all reliant on China's terms. The numbers tell the story. Over 70% of Russia's industrial imports now come from China, often through shell companies and re-export routes in Central Asia. That dependency isn't partnership, it's subjugation. Beijing holds the keys to Russia's industrial survival, and it knows it. Meanwhile, on the home front, the cracks are widening. Inflation is rising again. Prices for food, fuel, and medicine are climbing in regions far from Moscow. Factories can't find workers. Entire sectors, from aviation to IT, are hollowed out because the skilled professionals have fled. Hundreds of thousands of Russians left the country after mobilization began in 2022. Many more followed in 2023 and 2024, taking their knowledge, innovation, and ambition with them. What's left behind is a war economy without a future, a machine that can only consume, never create. Now, combine that with the psychological strain of continuous loss. Russia's propaganda system works overtime to convince its people that everything is under control. But social media, encrypted channels, and even casual conversations are telling a different story. Russians are starting to whisper what they were once too afraid to say out loud: something is wrong. Funerals are happening every week. Pensions are delayed. Promises made to families of dead soldiers are being quietly broken. And every time another wave of conscripts is sent to the front, another community loses its sons. Pokrovsk exposed this rot. It proved that the Kremlin's promise of inevitable victory is fiction. And once people stop believing the story, the entire system begins to wobble. Because autocracies don't survive on truth, they survive on belief. When belief dies, collapse becomes only a matter of time. But here's the most striking shift Pokrovsk triggered. Outside Russia, in Washington, Brussels, London, and Warsaw, military planners are now seeing what many hoped for but didn't dare say aloud. The Russian military is not only bleeding, it's breaking. Its ability to sustain long-term offensives is collapsing under the weight of its own inefficiency. Its logistics are fractured, its chain of command poisoned by politics, and its technological edge obsolete. And that changes everything. For NATO and the EU, Pokrovsk is not just a Ukrainian victory, it's a strategic signal. It means the Western coalition strategy, slow, deliberate attrition combined with economic isolation, is working. It means that the pressure can't just continue, it must intensify. Expect to see new sanctions in the coming weeks, new shipments of advanced air defense systems, and a growing debate about whether Ukraine should be allowed to strike deeper into Russian territory. That debate matters. Because up until now, the West has walked a careful line, supporting Ukraine, but avoiding actions that could trigger direct confrontation with Moscow. But as Russia weakens, the calculus changes. A desperate enemy is dangerous, yes, but a defeated one is less so if the victory is decisive. Pokrovsk has given policymakers a glimpse of that possibility that this war, once thought endless, may actually have an endgame. Still, we can't ignore the danger. History has taught us that collapsing regimes are unpredictable. When a power like Russia starts losing control, it lashes out. It blames foreign saboteurs, threatens nuclear escalation, stages political theater to distract from the truth. The question now isn't just how far Russia can fall, it's how it will behave as it falls. Will it tighten internal repression? Will it gamble on new offensives? Or will it start to fracture from within as local leaders and oligarchs fight to preserve their own power? There are already signs of strain. Regional governors complaining about mobilization quotas, military bloggers criticizing the Ministry of Defense more openly. Even within the elite, whispers are growing louder that Putin's war has gone from patriotic crusade to national disaster. None of them can say it publicly, of course, not yet. But power in Russia has always moved in whispers before it moves in public. And so we find ourselves at a crossroads. Pokrovsk could mark the beginning of the end or the beginning of something far more dangerous. If the Kremlin decides that it cannot survive peace, it will try to survive chaos. That means escalation, not negotiation, more strikes on civilian targets, more mobilizations, more propaganda. But the truth has a way of slipping through even the tightest censorship. People see the funerals. They see the empty shells. They see their sons not coming home. Pokrovsk is not just a military defeat. It's a revelation, one that Russia can't unsee. It's the moment the mask slipped, the moment when the world saw how much of the empire's power was smoke and mirrors. And no amount of propaganda can change that now. In the next and final section, we'll bring all of this together, the battlefield, the economy, the politics, and look at what this means for the future. Because after Pokrovsk, one thing is certain. The war may continue, but the outcome has already started to take shape. Friends, as we close tonight's report, let's step back from the smoke and statistics, from the explosions and numbers that have filled this broadcast, and look at what all of this truly means. Because Pokrovsk was not just a battle. It was a revelation. It tore away the myths, the propaganda, the layers of denial that have surrounded this war for years. It showed us in one brutal 24-hour window the truth of where things stand. Russia's power is not what it once was, and Ukraine's resilience is not what anyone expected it to be. Over 1,000 Russian soldiers lost in a single day. Nearly 500 drones wiped from the sky, 90 fuel tankers turned into fireballs. Each number tells a story of collapse, not just on the battlefield, but within the system that sent those soldiers to fight. The Russian state built its strength on fear and illusion, but fear cannot fuel tanks, and illusion cannot replace lost men. Pokrovsk proved that wars built on lies eventually collapse under the weight of reality. What makes this moment historic is not just the scale of destruction, it's the meaning behind it. Pokrovsk is the moment when the balance of power visibly shifted. For the first time, the world can see that Ukraine's strategy, precision, intelligence, adaptation, has broken through the myth of Russian invincibility. And that changes everything. It changes how Europe defends itself. It changes how the United States views its commitments. It changes how autocracies across the world measure their own limits. Inside Russia, the tremors are only beginning. Every coffin that returns home, every mother who stops believing state television, every general who falls from grace, all of it chips away at the foundation of a system that once seemed unshakable. For years, Putin's power rested on two pillars: control and confidence. Pokrovsk has damaged both. And while the Kremlin can still control the message, it cannot restore the confidence of a nation watching its own illusions crumble. For Ukraine, this day will be remembered not just as a victory, but as validation, proof that courage, intelligence, and unity can defeat even the most brutal adversary. It will be studied in military academies as the moment modern warfare turned a corner when drones, data, and discipline overcame sheer numbers. It will be remembered by the families who endured the darkest nights and never stopped believing that light would return. And for the rest of the world, Pokrovsk is a reminder that freedom, once challenged, must be defended not just with weapons, but with truth. Because truth is what wins wars of propaganda. Truth is what breaks dictatorships. Truth is what survives when lies finally burn out. So as we end tonight, remember this November 15th, 2025 will not just be written in history books as another day of fighting. It will stand as the day the world saw the cost of tyranny and the strength of those who refused to bow to it. Friends, thank you for watching. Stay aware, stay hopeful, and stay with us as we continue to bring you the truth behind the headlines. Like and subscribe to the channel, share the story, and tell us what you think in the comments below. Because your voice, your awareness, and your understanding are part of this story too.